Nooma.
My wife makes the best salsa in the world. And I know someone's gonna say, like, well, you haven't tried mine, but seriously, who are we kidding? She uses Roma tomatoes, and then she adds onion and some jalapeno pepper, and then of course some cilantro. And it all gets thrown into a blender, and then I sit in front of this bowl of food from the heavens, and I take a tortilla chip, and for a few moments, all is right with the world. Now these tomatoes, they were originally alive. I mean, they were connected to the vine, which had its roots in the soil, which grew from the earth. I mean, same with the onions, same with the pepper, same with the cilantro. I mean, they were once all receiving nutrients from the earth, but then they were harvested, thrown onto a truck, and brought to the farmer's market, and they eventually ended up in our kitchen. And so when they were harvested, they were severed from the vine. They were pulled from the soil. They were disconnected from their life source and then brought to us so that we could eat them. And if we don't eat, we don't live. And so this food, this dead food, gives us life. And actually, the more recently food has been living, the more life it gives us. Fresh food is better for us. I mean, this actually explains the nutritional deficiencies of a Twinkie. I mean, it can't give life because it was never really living. And so there is this principle that the death of this one thing gives us life. Our survival, our sustenance, our life is dependent upon the death of another living thing. Or think about our skin. Our skin is dying constantly. I mean, it's flaking off and it's turning into dust, but in those very same moments in which our skin is dying, our body is also producing new skin to replace that dead old skin. I mean, you get an entirely new skin every 30 days. And this isn't just true about what we eat and about our bodies. I mean, think about fertilizer. You know, the fertilizer that you spread on things to make them grow. Where does the best fertilizer come from? It comes from manure, which is decomposing and dead. Or think about the seasons. New life springs forth from the earth in the spring. And then by the end of summer and fall, things begin to die. The leaves fall from the trees, and then by winter time, it's dead. No grass growing, no flowers in bloom, dead. And then in spring, new life explodes again from the earth. And then we repeat the cycle, only to go back through death, life, death, life. I mean, this rhythm of death giving way to life is built into the very fabric of the created order. Which takes us back to the tomatoes. If we want more tomatoes, new tomatoes, so we can make more salsa, we're gonna have to plant tomato seeds. And what is planting? It's taking a seed and placing it in the earth and then burying it. I mean, generally, we bury things that are dead. And then in some mysterious way, a new tomato plant will arise out of the earth because death is the engine of life. So when the Bible tells the story of God bringing new life to the world, how does the story go? It's about Jesus who dies and rises again. It's about death bringing about new life. His death on a cross, his resurrection, and in some ways it's how the world has always worked. And Jesus doesn't just enter into this process with his own flesh and blood, but then he invites people to take up their cross. He says at one point, unless you lose your life for my sake, you'll never find it. He even says in one teaching that unless a seed falls to the ground, it can't produce new life. Jesus teaches us how to die so that we can really live. Do you ever find yourself telling a story in a particular way to make yourself look better? Like you emphasize certain details and you leave other details out? You twist the story ever so slightly in your favor. For many of us, this impulse is so deep within us. We've been doing this for so long, we're not even aware that we're doing it. What would it be like to be free from all that? I mean, Jesus invites that part of us to die. The part of us that always has to be right, the part of us that always has to be better, the part of us that always has to look good. Jesus invites that part of us to die. We pick up at a very young age from the world around us that it's about winning, it's about impressing, that our value and our worth and our acceptance comes from how good we are, how fast, how better, how skilled, how smart, how competent. We quite quickly realize that the way to get ahead is to raise yourself up, to take the path of ascent, to climb higher and higher, but that's exhausting. And so we spend all this energy because we learn how to construct these masks and facades to cover up all the things that we aren't. And so we spend all this energy maintaining this false self, carefully protecting and preserving this image that we've created. But Jesus invites us not to the path of ascent, but the path of descent. Jesus invites us to die to all that so that we could really live. Jesus invites us to lose our life so that we can really find it. I mean, think about how many relationships, how many broken relationships aren't gonna get any better until somebody is the first to apologize. Why is that so hard? It's so hard because when we say we're sorry, when we admit that our hands aren't clean and that we may have contributed to this mess, saying you're sorry is a form of death. It's a refusal to carry on the false self and prop it up. It's a refusal to preserve that perfect image of yourself. And that can be hard to do when you've spent so much time maintaining a particular version of yourself. I mean, Jesus invites us to lose our life so that we can really find it. Or how many times when you think about doing something new, is your next thought, what will people think? Think of how many of our fears are rooted in how we believe we're going to be perceived by others, whether we're going to be admired, whether we're going to be seen as worthy or good enough. And Jesus invites us to die to all that. Jesus' insistence is that we're already loved, that God is love, and that love of God gets rid of fear. I mean, this cuts right to the core of Jesus' message. I mean, we become easily deceived into thinking that we're loved because we're moral enough, spiritual enough, good enough, right enough. But the essence of Jesus' message is that we aren't saved, accepted, loved, and valued because of how spiritual, moral, true, or right we are, but his message was that we're saved in our death. We're invited to trust him, that what we could never do on our own, he's already done for us. Some people put it like this: Jesus saves. But some people refuse to die, don't they? I mean, they just endlessly cling to their ego and their false self, and they keep propping up this particular version of themselves and trusting in their own efforts to somehow, someday be good enough. And as they do that, the life is just drained right out of them. Is this you? Like holding so tightly to your life that you're actually losing it? I was approached by these people recently who had a question about something in the Bible. It was actually something Jesus said. So they read it to me and they say, well, what's he mean here? Can you explain it to us? And as they're reading it, I realize I have no idea what he means here. I mean, no clue, blank, nothing. And I'm realizing, what am I supposed to say here? What happened was so strange. It was as if time kind of it got slower and slower as I realized I had these options. I had these paths set out before me. The one option was to make up some sort of convoluted, complicated answer, essentially to talk over their heads. I mean, anything to avoid the simple truth that I didn't know how to answer their question, anything to save face. I mean, I'd love to be super-powered spiritual answer man, but I'm not. The other option was to tell them the truth, to give them an honest answer, to look them in the eyes and to say to them, you know, I don't know how to answer your question. But that would have been painful. And it would have been painful because it would have involved a death. I would have had to die to my desire to appear competent, to appear smart, to appear good enough. You know, we have these endless opportunities every day, don't we? These endless choices, paths, options. Are we going to choose the carefully preserved image or the honest answer? The false self or the true? Are we going to choose fear or freedom? The path of ascent or the path of descent? There is a cycle, a rhythm, a truth about how the universe works. From tomatoes to our bodies to ecosystems to the seasons, death is the engine of life. Jesus invites us to die so that we can really live. So may you lose your life and in the process find it. May the love of God free you from fear, and may you trust that Jesus saves.